G'day and welcome to another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups. On this episode, we're working on the Mini. We're going to be adjusting the tappets. I'm going to explain to you what they are, what they do, and how to adjust them. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave your comments in the section below for things that you want to see me do. Now, the reason why it's important to ensure that you adjust the valve clearances every service is for several reasons. The first one being that it will help eliminate valve clatter. It'll also give you a smooth operation and responsiveness of the engine, along with extending the life of the valve train. Now, with my engine, it runs push rods. So how this operates is as the engine rotates, the camshaft then acts on the cam follower. The cam follower then pushes on the push rod, which then acts on the end of the rocker arm, which then pivots and tilts, which then opens the valve. Now, the first thing we're going to do is remove the valve cover, which is this here. We're going to remove these wing nuts and get access to the valve train. Now, if you have this style of wing nut, don't forget to grab both of the washers, both the small and big one, and put them in a safe spot. Next thing we're going to do is just move the accelerator and the choke cables out of the way, and then we're just going to give it a little bit of a pry in order for it to come off. Put that in a safe spot out of the way, facing upwards like this. The reason why you want to face it upwards is so that way you don't damage the mating surface, which is between here and the rocker cover. Now that we've got the rocker cover off, it can be a bit intimidating. You've got some valves, you've got rocker arms, rocker shaft, a couple of nuts and bolts, and it can be a bit daunting as to know what to do. But it's okay, we're going to do this one step at a time. So all we're going to be doing is minimizing the clearance between the top of the valve and the rocker arm itself. Now, what I like to do before I start is remove the spark plugs. So all we're going to do is remove one spark plug lead at a time and put them off to the side. Now, you don't want to get these mixed up or forget the order in which you remove them, simply because this is the firing order of the vehicle. If you get the wires mixed up, then when you go to put it back together, you're not going to have a fun time running the engine. So we're going to remove each spark plug one at a time, and that's going to give us a greater access to be able to turn the engine over by hand without having too much resistance. As I take each spark plug out, I'm going to put them off to the side in the same order in which they came out in. Now remember, you can also tell a lot by looking at a spark plug as to what the tip is like. In my case, it's been running quite rich, mainly because it's winter, so I have it adjusted a little bit richer than what it normally would run. Also, it can determine what sort of condition your engine's in. Now, depending how tight you have your fan belt, you can generally turn the engine over by hand just by turning the alternator. As you can see, the valves are starting to move. Now I'm going to show you an easy way in which you need to adjust valves, but we're not going to be using this book. It is a good reference, but it can be a little bit daunting if you don't understand the full mechanics of an engine. Now, you want to adjust one valve at a time. So what you want to do is make sure that each of the rocker arms is doing what we call rocking. Now, rocking refers to the camshaft lobe not acting on the top of the valve whatsoever. So as you can see here, this one has movement. Whereas the next valve along, the camshaft lobe is pushing on the rocker arm, which is then engaging the valve, either letting air in or air out of the cylinder. So we can't adjust this one until we've rotated the engine over. So we're going to do one valve at a time. Once we finish, we're then going to rotate the engine by hand and then proceed to the next valve. Now, the valve clearance we're going to be doing is 1/15 of an inch, or in metric terms, it's 0.381 of a millimeter. So all we're going to be doing is placing the feeler gauge between the valve and the rocker arm, loosening the nut, and then making the adjustment via the bolt at the top. We're going to need to get a 7/16 spanner. We're going to loosen off the end, and then we're going to get a flat blade screwdriver, and we're going to loosen it off in here, which is then going to give us a greater clearance. Once you've got the clearance, you then want to be slowly adjusting the screw until it comes to almost a stop, but you can still move the feeler gauge between the top of the valve and the rocker arm. If you tighten up the bolt all the way and the feeler gauge is unable to move, you've done it up too tight. If it is too loose, it can slide in and out very easily. It's far too loose. So you want to be finding that fine-tune adjustment between the top of the valve and the rocker arm to make sure that it is not too stiff, but is also not too loose. So I'm quite happy with that. We're then going to go lock that off. Now you want to make sure that you support the bolt as well as the nut upon turning it. That way you can ensure that the bolt doesn't move and your adjustment doesn't become incorrect. Make sure that it's not able to be moved too freely or it's too stiff. Once you've done the first one, you're then going to rotate the engine again and we're going to do the second one. Now that the second valve is rocking, we can then make the adjustment. So it's always good to check them before you start to see if they are at the right setting or if it needs to be adjusted. Now this one has a little bit of movement, which is fine, so I'm happy to leave that one. So I went to put the feeler gauge in this and it's quite stiff to move, so we're definitely going to need to adjust this one. So back it off probably an eighth of a turn, get the adjustment in there, and then slowly wind in your bolt bit by bit to get the adjustment correct. If it's too loose, it's going to be quite noisy. If it's too tight, it's going to be riding the valve, which means that the valve is not going to be closing or opening properly and can potentially lead to an engine misfire. Now that one's fine, we can move to the next one. So that's it guys, that's how you adjust the tappets on a vehicle. Don't forget to renew the gasket if you don't have a new one. You can reuse it, but the likelihood of it leaking is quite high depending how old it is. Don't forget also to adjust one valve at a time. If you adjust too many at once, you'll get behind and you'll forget exactly where you're at and where you're up to in terms of the adjustments. Make sure that you adjust them every service or as per manufacturer's specifications. Like I said before, some modern cars still have these tappet adjustments, but most of them likely don't because it's a hydraulic lifter, so there's no need for the adjustment at all. Once the tappet cover's on, don't forget to start the car and check it for any leaks. If you see any, switch engine off immediately and rectify them straight away. Don't forget also to drive the car and see how it feels before and after the adjustments. Thanks heaps for watching guys, we'll see you next time on an episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups, all things DIY and mechanical. Oh, by the way, do you like the umbrella that holds up the bonnet because I'm too lazy to get a strut for it? Hey, maybe that'll be another episode. If you've got some bonnet struts out there that you want to send me with articulating joints, let me know in the comments below. See you guys.